America. This is Uncle Sam with music and the truth until dawn. Right now, I've got a few words for some of our brothers and sisters in the occupied zone. The chair is against the wall. The chair is against the wall. John has a long mustache. John has a long mustache. It's 12 o'clock, Americans, another day closer to victory. And for all of you out there on or behind the lines, this is your song.
Hi, welcome everybody to our daily gun show. Come to you live every weeknight at midnight Eastern and talk about guns for about an hour. This is episode 861. We've done the show for a while. Right now it's a panel discussion. We send links out to people over on gunchannels.com. And we've got some people joining us. We've got Clover jumping in from Texas. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for the invite.
You bet. And then Gizzard jumping in from Kansas. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for the invite.
On Mondays, we typically talk about behind the scenes, how do you run a channel, the tech type of stuff, and we look at the calendar. Tuesdays, we'll look at our Second Amendment. Wednesdays, entertainment and fun. Thursdays, industry and tech. And then on Fridays, we'll wrap up the week taking a look over at the news that's been posted over at gunchannels.com. So we want to thank people that are watching us over at gunchannels.com, community, built for conversations like this one. And then the people that are watching on YouTube, one of the social media platform tools that we use to facilitate conversations like this, at least for the next little while, until they get rid of this particular piece of software or service called Hangouts. It has been connected to our YouTube accounts. It's been a feature of our YouTube accounts where we could open up a room called a Hangout, invite 9 other people, have a total of 10 people in a room like this. And then since it's connected to our YouTube, our video channels, we can run the live show as we're doing right now. And you've experienced for about 800 something episodes, 860 episodes on this show. And then when it's all over, we hit the stop record button, and it turns into a video. It renders into a video on our YouTube channels, and that's been very convenient. It's allowed us to have, to grow in the community for sure, and to develop relationships, have conversations that develop and evolve with more people becoming part of these conversations. And what's cool is then they get archived. They go to a YouTube channel and a pretty big platform. They stick there, and depending on how successful people are at giving them some kind of tags or attributes that they can be found on the system. The platform at least does hold most of them. And barring any weird stuff, we've got a pretty cool system here, and it's going to change. It hasn't been here forever. It's only been here since 2012, so it's a pretty recent big chunk of the internet, but is it even the majority of the time we've spent online? I don't think so, at least depending on who we are. Now, it might be somebody's in complete existence online, so those people are going to be ripping a whole different Band-Aid off than some of us, where this is maybe the third or fourth major way that groups of people have had conversation. Anyway, I guess I've kind of brought that up because tonight's topic is together we create innovation, and I don't know if that was my notes or if that was some key phrase that I heard when I was listening to an audiobook, which it could have been. Most of these Monday topics I get when I'm listening to an audiobook or something, or having a conversation with somebody. I'll open up the spreadsheet where I keep track of the show notes, and I'll put this kind of note in there. So I think it has a couple of levels, and I'm going to let Clover and Gizzard chat. Anybody that wants to join us tonight, head over to Gun Channels. We've got links out there. I didn't send them out in an email tonight. And what do you guys think when we talk? You guys heard me play two-minute videos before the show, so I imagine that might give you some influence. But what do you think of when, I guess the title of the show is Together We Create Innovation? What do you think you're getting into tonight? Because a lot of people didn't join it. They got scared from this topic.
Yeah, well, some people aren't forward thinkers, right? No, I think all of that's valid. I mean, for me, it speaks to the whole, we've heard it 1,000 times. The whole 2 heads are better than 1 mentality. So, I mean, it's totally a valid approach.
Yeah, I guess it does summarize in some ways to that, right?
Yeah, I think when a group of people and a group of people put things together to try to come up with a solution, they aren't all going to come up with the same method to attack it and the same results. But when you compare all those together, you can get a pretty good basis for making a decision. That's kind of your team concept there.
Well, and then there's also the thing if you're talking about getting a group of people together with a certain idea or goal or whatever it might be in mind. Let's say for example, since we're using innovation, let's look at this from a product standpoint. You've got a group of people and they all come together with solving some type of an issue by way of building a product. Well, all of those people are going to have a different thing to, of course, contribute, but they're also going to be thinking about different aspects of that product or that what that product's going to do in the way that it affects their lives, right? So it's perspective. They're bringing a different perspective to the game, and then therefore, when you have all of these people, if you just have one person that creates, let's say, a product, there can be flaws in that product because that person is not thinking about this from a certain perspective or being used in a certain way. Where if you have a collaboration of effort toward that, then the final product is going to be a more reliable, robust, effective product.
I think so. I mean, it might have a flavor that not everybody wants, right? But then I think it's better than, well, at least it's no different. It's no better or worse than being a plain vanilla flavor that nobody asked for.
Yeah. I think you run a risk. You run a risk maybe with that approach of it being generic. But you also with that risk of it becoming generic, there's also the probability that it's more appealing to a broader base as well.
Well, it depends on what we're talking about. You're going to products, so if you're thinking of it that way, I guess I'm thinking of it as, of course, because it's this show. I'm thinking of it as Second Amendment.
Even a 2A effort is still a broader appeal. There has to be, people.
No, see, that's the opposite. That's what this set of thinking is opposition to. It isn't to create a committee so that you end up with something in the middle. I mean, maybe when I made that show note that you're allowed to have that interpretation, obviously, but together we create innovation comes from like those two things I played before come from the idea of tribe, I guess, and I don't know if that's a phrase coined by this Seth Godin or whatever recently, or if he's coining it for something, but he did make that book or whatever. But the idea is that that instead of having to appeal to the masses with your Wonder Bread, you can have a rye bread and you can have a pumpernickel and you can have a sourdough and you can have a biscuit and you can have an English muffin that are more specific and aren't going to appeal to everybody and are going to sell fewer if you're in a business or appeal to fewer if you're in a awareness thing or whatever it is, but you can effectively get what you need out of it, whether it be a business thing or whether it be a group effort or like a nonprofit type of situation or a community effort. You don't need to have a community effort that needs to change to appeal to the whole United States. If you need to fix something at a school, you need to appeal to the people who would, are necessary to fix that thing at the school. So if it's, you don't need to come up with a bake sale that appeals to everybody in town. You might be able to come up with, make a cupcake that looks like a diving thing, and then it appeals to enough of the niche that you've accomplished the task. At least if the way I understand it, that's the concept of this, like either business or whatever leadership strategy of like, instead of appealing to the masses, appeal to the groups. And then when you go with that, like you've got these individual small groups. In that one video, they said like, now you've got people who wear gym shoes, and then you got people who like red gym shoes, and then you got people who like red gym shoes with white laces. And if you can when you have enough people who can communicate on something like the internet, to where you can have not just people who wear tennis shoes grouping together, but then the people that like red ones, and then there's a subset of the people who like red shoes with white laces. What you end up with is the result of all of those individual niches coming up with ideas that filter up. And again, I don't know if they're supposed to appeal to the center, like if they're supposed to be the most broadly appealing, or if they're just supposed to offer like authentic position, like authentic representation of a whatever, in our case, Second Amendment awareness or whatever. So again, I was asking you how you interpret the title of the thing. So I guess I sort of threw at you what I think what I was getting from the books or whatever when I wrote the topic. So Gary, how do you meld the two between what was that when I said?
How do you do what now? I'm not sure I understand.
You can use your notes. No, I don't know. Clover was just saying that his interpretation, right, if I'm understanding it, was that what would I call the thing again? Together we create innovation. Like I think you were saying, like as a bunch of people coming together to collaborate, we get something that's appealing to the majority and it's going to be solid or whatever.
Well, I mean, I don't think. Well, yeah, I mean, I definitely think that it's going to be more intricate, more solid, more reliable, more robust. I mean, it's going to be less apt to have flaws, I guess, is a more general term to box all that stuff into one term. But as far as the appeal, I think maybe that was misunderstood. I didn't necessarily mean that it would. I don't know what. Let's see. I'm trying to think of a better way to word it.
In other words, like the most efficient, practical, useful gadget isn't going to be the most appealing to any specific people, or it might even be appalling to somebody.
Yeah. Right.
Like just because everybody comes up with something doesn't mean that anybody wants to champion it. It's like, okay, that's a great idea, but I don't like it.
Yeah, but at the same time, if you think about it, I mean, you've got this, whatever it might be, whether it's a cause or a product or whatever we're talking about. So certain people see certain problems, right? I don't even want to use the word flaws. Let's take the Second Amendment. And certain people see certain infringements on the Second Amendment as the big issues, right? So those are those pockets. Those are the ones like you were talking about with the, not just sneakers, but red sneakers, not just red sneakers, but white sneakers. So you've got these people that, okay, their big cause is NFA. The other big cause is suppressors. These people, as long as they're able to hunt, right? I mean, that's kind of their cause. You've got all these different things. So if you've got a product, that being the Second Amendment, that many people are collaborating on, and they are working on closing those gaps, on making it more robust, more reliable, more without flaws, then you're going to attract people because they see that they're not seeing the whole picture of, okay, you put this huge thing together that's flawless. They're seeing that, hey, there's this and this. My mindset is that I like things that don't have this flaw, right? When I'm looking at something to invest in, these are the pitfalls that I'm trying to sidestep. These are the puddles that I'm trying to jump. And this particular thing, because you've had all these minds collaborating, this particular thing does not have those drawbacks. So therefore, it's more appealing.
Potentially, yeah. And I don't know if we explained all that, but did that help you figure out how to do the? Oh, and then I guess my thing was the individual groups that go out to the crazy specifics of whatever it is like that. Like they like to not just hunt. They don't just like suppressors. They hunt with suppressors. And then there's probably like people that hunt just deer with suppressors, or people.
Oh, there's people that hunt. There's people that hunt with ARs. There's people that hunt ARs with suppressors, and there's people that hunt specific animals with ARs that are suppressed. Yeah, exactly.
Like the author, I think if I understand the author, and what my thing was that when you have all those little groups, you don't. The idea is that innovation comes from the fact that there are those little groups. That when you don't offer that, maybe it's not the word offer, but when there are not, like when circumstances don't have separations or whatever you want to call it, like that, those smaller and smaller groups, then you just can't get the same kind of innovation. Maybe that's the way to say it, that you'll only get a different type of actual innovation. And I think maybe another way to conceptualize it all is when you think of this huntings with suppressors. Everybody want to get rid of the NFA, or at least a lot of people. A lot of people would like suppressors, for whatever reason. And then there's certainly the these are a safety thing. There's that angle. Like these are better for people who have maybe a handicap or something. There's that angle. Then there's the these are the opposite of making it effective for a criminal, since they lengthen the gun and they make it heavier and they make it hot, right? Like there's the anti-crime side of it. So there's all these different sides, but the hunters are the ones that came up with the hunting. I can't think about it. The Hearing Protection Act, basically, and then that's where I think if we would have all been trying to come up with something together, we might not have ever agreed on that, and instead the hunters just pushed it up. I mean, they weren't alone. I'm sure all those other groups I mentioned might have been attempting to push up their own reason, or I guess their own focused legislation or something. But yeah, I think they're an example of a focused piece of a firearms branch or whatever, that area of interest that we're all familiar with. I'm sure Stand Your Ground and state CCW is similar. Each of those states have their own specific interest in getting their CCW. And then I guess maybe the state CCW, it would have had to have been a different fight for each state. So that's where, trying to push it at a federal level would have been a tougher sell, quote unquote, or a tougher fight, where you let the people who are local fight the fight. Maybe that's another example of that.
Well, you're talking about the things trickling up. So you've got, I'm still taking it from using the suppressor and the hunting thing, right? So you've got a large hunting is, hunters are a big, huge swath of this, right? They're kind of the top tier, I guess we could say, right? So within that hunters, you're going to have a lot of different sentiment when it comes to suppressors. You're going to have those that they don't care at all. They're like, what do I need that for? I don't care. You're going to have the ones that are, you're right. Oh, well, I need this because it's less recoil. I need this because, it offers protection for my hearing. You're going to have those that I want to use this because it creates a more effective hunting experience for as far as game, that sort of stuff. And it trickles all the way down to those, and as it trickles down, it gets completely away from hunters altogether. So it's really weird in that sense, because you get down to, you're right, you get down to people that would just like to see the process more streamlined. There are those people out there where it's like, oh, well, I just like to, I don't mind the $200 stamp, but let's do it, where the $200 stamp is paid, at the, it's right there, it's rolled into the 4473 somehow, or whatever. It's all digital. It's not at the FFL, level. Then you go on down further to the people that want to just eliminate, get suppressors completely off the list. And then further down is eliminate the NFA completely. So all of that has, you look at that common thread as you go up. So the key is how do you get the ones that from eliminate the NFA completely to the, well, hunter, suppressors don't really, come into play with me. I don't care about them, so it's a matter of how does that, in that instance, how do you get that to trickle up? And my thinking is there's got to be talking about it, education, outreach, other things, because it's not, the problem is the ones that are hollering get rid of the NFA, I don't think those are going to be the ones that can rally those hunters that say, well, I don't need it. It doesn't have a use in my, hunting application. I think it's got to be a tier or two below that has to be able to convince them. It's those other ones that's got to say, hey, look, we realize that you don't like these or you don't want these, but do you realize that, if other people were hunting with suppressors in your area, then when you've got that big buck in the sights and somebody on the other side of the lease cuts off a shot that's loud enough that it scares your buck away, you're going to wish that dude had a suppressor, when, it's 10 years down the road and you've got hearing problems because you hunt all the time and you're not wearing plugs or muffs or anything else, or you're having shoulder surgery because you're shooting a 300 Win Mag or whatever it might be that you could cut obvious recoil with a suppressor, and it takes, those are the people that have to reach the next highest level. So I guess in saying all of that, my question with that is when you talk about the tribe, are you talking about the tribe being those individual things that I'm talking about, or tribe as the whole thing, as in, we see value in suppressors. We want to change the dynamics or the regulations around suppressors.
I think that in this context, they're talking like smaller and smaller groups. They're not talking like the overall group. I don't know what the term they use for the accumulation of tribes or whatever that are on the same mindset or whatever. But I'm taking excerpts from stuff on that.
Well, I just don't want to get off track because where I was fixing to go with that was I always go back to this bridge building mentality. Mm-hmm. And I was fixing to go to where you've got a lot of people out there that are these, and God love them, are, the Howl at the Moon shall not be infringed, get rid of the NFA. And you've got these people trying to convince the hunters, and that's part of what I was getting at too with that. You've got people that have this big, huge gap between them, and they're trying to reach people that they're not able to reach. The pathway, the bridge, you can't jump that many. You can't jump that many tribes if it's in the sense you're talking about, where each individual one is a tribe.
Maybe if you think of it as like branches, I don't know, the tribe is just that guy's book or whatever. But these branches, these subsets of a group of interest or whatever, or our community. Then, but I think that, again, I'm not sure if this is even in the thing, but I think there's the potential for when you've got people that are focused here and focused, there are different branches of a tree that's all 2A, right? That you're right, there's not a direct correlation or connection between them, and there's definitely validity in what you're talking about with the bridge concept. But I don't know if this is adversarial to that concept at all, but the idea that like there's some spontaneity, or maybe the word, I don't know, when an idea doesn't seem like, or no one would have expected, you couldn't have anticipated that this was the result, but something that works over here sparks something over there. And I think some of the thing that, again, when we look at where we're at with tech, if we include, where we're at in 2019 into this whole thing, and not just theoretically societies and cultures and people and blah, blah, blah. Like, we can't look, or we can't be stuck in the mindset of how we used to be able to communicate and the speed at which we used to be able to communicate, and then the necessity for an individual to be the bridge. Because now you can have something hosted on a gun streamer, a gun tube, or a gun channels, a focused place, where people are jointly hosting things or posting things so that they can share. And within that way, I think, again, if I'm looking at it, I don't know this word tribes, I'll drop that, but like this 2A tree that we've got, and we got different branches on it that go, like we've described, from hunting to suppressors to ARs and all that. Now that we've got inspiration happening in these focused areas, I think we've got more and more opportunity as ever, especially with, like you're talking about, with the bridges, the people act as bridges to let people know, hey, there's something that's going on over here that might apply to here, and that strengthens us all, perhaps. So I don't know if we're necessarily talking about something that's one or the other. I just think maybe two different ways of looking at the same thing, that you don't need all the inspiration, all the points of light to come from that center of the tree. I mean, it's nice when they come from there because they're strong and a lot of people can understand it. But I think that when we're talking innovation and new ways to approach things, there's value, I think, in the letting people just nerd out in their areas and figure out what their dreams are. Like, hey, if we got rid of the NFA, that would open up CCW, right? Like, think about all the different ways guns could be if they didn't have these stupid restrictions from 1934 placed on them.
Yeah, arbitrary restrictions, right? You know, that's where I don't know, I don't want to get off into a whole NFA conversation, but who come up with that? Who determined that? Why is that? Why is a certain measurement better or worse than another measurement? And it's just a lot of that makes no sense. Why are suppressors on there regardless? Because it's not even a firearm.
And hopefully with a thriving community that's aware of what's going on in the different areas. And again, like Clover's concept of having people that consider themselves bridges or connections between areas of this 2A tree, right? That are aware of what's going on in different branches that interest them or that they feel are important. Then again, if there's some inspiration going on over here or some frustration, hey, we wish we could develop something that's CCW that somebody could wear on their wrist, that they wouldn't have to have a holster, and it could be visible and it's effective and it can't be taken from them, but it would be an AOW. There's no trigger on it, and how much greater would it be if we could use a plastic projectile so that it could be a lethal, blah blah blah. And then you got people over here that are lawyers and are just interested in challenging the NFA because it's an arbitrary, gray area, stupid written, dumb law that's old and should be challenged. And maybe there's somebody that can see those two, on the surface, vastly different areas of the spectrum and touch them together and figure out, like, hey, look, if you can get with these people, then boom, all of a sudden you got an ASA. Except now it's called the AOW, getting rid of the AOW bill or something.
Yeah, I mean, even if you could dismantle portions of it, right? Which, I mean, the way that you got to realize that the way that the NFA was written, I mean, there's certainly portions of it that could be stricken down. It wasn't written, I can't believe it's held as long as it has, because it's been reinforced through subsequent legislation as long as it has, as poorly as it was actually written.
Yeah, you would think that with some real determination, it could be. Well, I think that's why people are working towards it.
I think the problem with it is that it's legacy, and meaning it's been around a long time, and most people just sadly just accept
live with it. Yeah.
And it's not immediate. So when you're talking about the organizations out there that are taking things to court and are filing these suits and are pushing and doing all these things, I think their focus is more immediate concerns, unfortunately. But what if we could get to a point to where we didn't have any immediate concerns? You know what I'm saying? We got to a point that, there wasn't all of these, at state level, especially, crap laws being passed. Then could these organizations turn around and start focusing on dismantling those pieces of legacy legislation?
And of course, the overwhelming problem is perception and society and views and that kind of thing. And hopefully enough people are down with the concept of it is possible to shift that, to change perception, and with more and more people participating in creating content and sharing their experiences out there, and see a more and more well-rounded example of what firearms owners are. It'll be tougher for them to suggest that we're just the crazy examples they find that are out of the norm. And again, we'll get to where hunting with a suppressor isn't that crazy, and it sounds kind of respectful and safe. And having a small, discrete thing that can stop an attacker seems like a good idea, and not some kind of unscrupulous.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. I mean, if you had a pin gun, right, or a cane gun, or a wallet gun, or you know what I'm saying, whatever. So you
Instead
mentioned
of a
AOW.
stylus, they install something
How
that allows
much
you to project
more? How much more? How much more or how much less? What am I reaching for here? As far as you're out in public and you've got a pen in your pocket, you know, um, one of the reasons that people don't are not one of the people's that people are opposed to constitutional carry or open carry is that, oh well, it makes people uncomfortable, blah 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 blah. Well, if you had a firearm that looked like a pen and it was in your pocket, then nobody knows the difference, right? It looks like a pen. So it's less, AOWs in that sense anyway. And again, we're talking about AOWs. Yes, I get it. It's a huge, broad swath of stuff. But when we're talking about pen guns or cane guns or something like that, umbrella guns even, they are disguised as other things. So therefore, they would be not be noticeable at all in society. It would be the perfect combination of you can defend yourself with it, plus it's not making anybody feel uncomfortable because they don't know any different.
Well, and of course, I'm going to look at it that whenever you have that situation, you deter crime because when a criminal has no idea who's going to be able to dish out a lethal result to their a lethal consequence to their crime, then there's not as much interest in doing it. And you look at the most heavily
Oh
armed
yeah.
of the world, that's typically the least crime. So
Hmm.
yeah, that's the part that they don't want to acknowledge, or they won't. Like you say, when you can turn the firearm, who has the firearm and who has it, who doesn't, to complete unknown,
Hmm.
then it's a lot more difficult to be a violent criminal.
Yep, and it don't take much before they start figuring that out.
Doesn't take anything. It just takes the concept that it doesn't even take examples. We already see that. There isn't blood in the streets,
Oh
and
yeah,
then calm. There's just immediate calm. so
yeah.
So that's something that they won't concentrate on. But that's again something that it takes. I think the concept here was again, if you look at it from individuals efforting, it takes everybody's chiming in on that to get the point across to the people that are out there. Because there's no thing that I can say that's going to get through to everybody. There's nothing Clover can say that gets through to the rest of them. It's going to take a combined effort by a bunch of people often to keep that message out there.
Well,
To hear something contrary to whatever they're getting programmed.
and I think everybody has a reach. It's kind of like I mentioned earlier. You're hardened to get rid of the NFA guys. Is not going to be able to get the hunters on board. Let's say, and it works the same way. I mean, your target shooter is not going to be, your, let me back that up. Your tactical, trainer guys are not going to be able to get necessarily target shooters, on board, so forth and so on. You've got these different levels. So, a challenge I would make to everybody out there is, I hear it all the time. Well, I talked to this guy and I tried to tell this guy this and do that. Well, maybe you're not the one that needs to be talking to them. Maybe it needs to be somebody that's a little more closely relatable to them. And so, what I would challenge everybody was to figure out where and this is, Yankee put out a little thing, um, basically where you fall on the FUD activist scale or whatever. And, I seen something in that I don't know if he was going for this or not, but I seen it and I thought, this is a good exercise because it kind of sitting down and reflecting on that kind of puts you in a perspective of where am I at? And then you're like your tree example, right? What branch am I on? And then once you figure out what branch you're on, it's what branches am I connected to? So what branches am I connected to that are further away from the Second Amendment than I am? Because the ones I'm connected to that are further away, that's the ones that I need to be trying to reach. Because feel free to jump in anytime now.
I feel like you should have solved this at any time. We get more than enough.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm just taking it all in because obviously you've got a better grasp on this than I do. So.
He heard branch of the tree and he started roosting.
Yeah, that's the problem. Although chickens can't fly, so they couldn't get up in the tree anyway.
What? I thought the chickens can fluster up into the air like that.
Not very high.
Well, what we'll do is we'll lean like one of them planks with some wood cross things on it up against one of the low branches, see how it get up there.
That'll work.
All right. So, like I say, just talking chat or talking shop on Mondays, and been listening to a couple of books that Angry American or Angry Platypus on Matt's chats or on Instagram. He had recommended a couple of books. I found a couple of those actual books, and then a couple of other books from those authors, and just tagged some of the interesting concepts to see how we could apply them to 2A. So we've been chatting about that, and just noticed that Pants is saying out on the gun channel side that a guy from his work at CCW and owns a bunch of guns says he hopes constitutional carry doesn't pass here in Ohio because he said, would you want some of these people we work with carrying guns? And I've heard that before. Have you ever had to deal with that one?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We dealt with that here when we were fighting for license, for our license to carry, licensed open carry. We had that, even here in Texas, and that's honestly, I mean, there's a way to approach it, and right now I'm not talking to that individual. So I want to make that clear, but that way of thinking is completely asinine, and here's why. Why would one assume just because constitutional carry passes that everybody's going to run out and start open carrying guns? First of all,
the heroin argument, like if they made heroin legal tomorrow, how many people are going to run out and get addicted to heroin?
That's exactly the argument I was going to make, was the drug argument that people say, well, if you legalize marijuana, everybody's going to be smoking marijuana. I know one person that's not. I don't have any. You can do what you want, but I'm not going to be doing it. They prohibition with alcohol, and alcohol became, there's tons and tons of people throughout history that never touched a drop of alcohol. It's legal. There's all kinds of things that are legal, and nobody partakes. Nobody does those things. Going to strip clubs is legal, and I don't go to strip clubs, and you know what I mean? Pornography, for example, is in, I don't so there's all kinds of things that are legal that people don't partake in. So to think that, that's the case is really an unreasonable thought. And I think you have to, those types of people, I think you have to, first of all, you have to be close enough to their way of thinking to be able to put it into a relatable term. And I don't know where that particular guy, Pants, I don't know where he falls on the scale. But I think you have to kind of walk them back a little bit, walk them back through that process to make them understand that, okay, yeah, you're right. Are there things that are legal that you do things that are legal that you don't do? And then maybe if they don't drink, or they don't smoke, or they don't do this or that, you say, well, so-and-so's legal, but yet you don't smoke. So why would other people just take up arms, because of that? And let's be honest, when we're talking about constitutional carry, the vast majority of people are not going to, or even open carry in general, the vast majority of people are not going to do it anyway. And the reason is because the reason you hear most commonly is quote unquote tactical advantage or whatever. I carry most of the time outside waistband just because it's comfortable, and then I have a shirt or something, over it. I don't got to worry about printing or anything. If I carry something big, I just carry something big. I don't worry about it. But I carry that way. It's a benefit for me to have open carry because I can carry in a way that's comfortable for me, and I don't have to worry about it. If the shirt pulls up and it's the whole thing showing, well, big freaking deal, big whoop, I don't have to, worry about any of that crap. So, it lessens the burden on some people, but yeah, I don't think it opens a floodgate at all.
Is it?
Wake up, yes.
I'm here. I'm here. I'm here.
So constitutional carry is what G was talking about. Do you hear about people say in your area? Do you hear people talk about how, well, if they don't want constitutional carry because if there's constitutional carry, everybody be running around. People they don't want would just be running around with guns.
Well, we already got constitutional carry, and not everybody runs around with guns. I can tell you that.
Well, there you go.
But I mean, you had those people who were saying that when they were debating the law 5 years ago. But along with people who said there'd be blood in the streets and everything else. But really, it's pretty much business as normal. The people who want guns have guns, and the people who don't want guns didn't just say, "Oh, I better go get a gun now because it's legal." No, that's not going to happen. It's not really ever going to happen. I don't think you're always going to have that. You're always going to have the people who don't want them.
Yeah,
which is fine.
Right.
And so, really, in the minds of people around here, not much has changed. It was pretty much a law was passed, and everybody's like, "Okay, let's go on with life," and everybody went on with life.
Well, and that's a valid thing that we haven't hit on that you mentioned there, Gizzard, is, we were talking about, people aren't going to open carry, just because they can. But even more than that, what you just mentioned is just because people aren't going to run out and buy guns and become gun people that aren't already gun people because there's open carry.
Constitutional carry.
Constitutional carry. I'm sorry.
I think there could be.
And I don't even see
more people, but I don't think it'll be more.
Yeah, it might be. Yeah,
it'll
you're
be
right.
more law abiding, and it'll be more of like the grandmas and the guy who wasn't sure and now he's going to, than it is criminals, because criminals would have already. Now I think maybe some wannabe criminals will be more brazen, thinking that they can't. But you're going to be just as in trouble if you got any kind of criminal record.
Yep.
If you're carrying, because it's not legal to carry when you can't, right? You're going to be, and a lot of times when they put constitutional carry in, they put extra heat when you're carrying when you can't, right? Put in it, they'll be like constitutional carry and an additional year in prison if you're carrying and you're not supposed to.
Right. Well, and if you think about it, I mean, criminals that are, felons, people that aren't supposed to own firearms, carrying firearms concealed, that happens now. Make no bones about it. How many times does a cop pull somebody over or somebody gets arrested for this and they've got a weapon and they're not supposed to have it and blah, blah, blah. So open carrying is going to draw more attention to you. So if you weren't supposed to have it in the first place, why would you open carry it? That makes no sense because you're drawing more attention to potentially getting caught doing something, and then you're in trouble. So even if there was constitutional carry, the majority of criminals would still conceal it.
Well, constitutional carry typically means constitutional concealed carry, not constitutional open.
Oh, okay.
So open carry is a separate thing. For whatever reason, some states have a problem with open. Like some states never had any. You could always open carry. Some states said you couldn't open carry, but every state for a while there said you could not conceal carry, except for Vermont. Vermont's the only one that's been true up until recently. So then in the 80s or so, starting with Florida or Vermont, states started to say, we're going to allow people to conceal carry again with a permit. And then all states followed through, and now all 50 states, including Illinois, you can carry with a permit. And then starting in, I forget who the first state was. We weren't the first state, but starting back in the day, Arizona was, I think, the third state in 2010.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's 16 states now that have gone through the wave of constitutional, which is basically saying, okay, at first in 86, they said you can't carry it all concealed. Like you can no longer carry a concealed gun. Then in the 2000s-ish, they started to create laws that said you can carry a concealed gun with a permit, right? Mm-hmm. And then now this constitutional is basically taking an eraser and removing the with a permit part. They're just erasing that part. So now it just says you can carry concealed.
All right.
So then
Well,
that's back to the original.
some states like Washington, for example, has constitutional open carry, right?
Well, it's not called constitutional. Then you would call it just open carry.
Okay.
So if open carry is a thing, or if open carry is sort of like, not covered, that's constitutional just means there's no law against it. So constitutional isn't a thing so much as a lack of prohibition. So there might be a lack of prohibition on open carry, or there might be like a proclamation that open carry is the only way you can carry. So there's, I don't know. So if you say constitutional carry, it should be implied in concealed. But open carry is the description of a whole bunch of different conditions.
See, down here, when people say constitutional carry, they mean open carry.
Because back in the day, before constitutional carry was this stupid national reciprocity bullshit, like it was before it was a big thing, and then we didn't really have that many CCW permits. That's what it was. When you first got a CCW permit, you either got permitted concealed carry or constitutional open carry, which again wasn't really a thing as much as just declaring I'm carrying my gun and I don't need a permit, so it's constitutional. It wasn't like law written. It was like basically the concept that sure, I can't carry because I'm not getting a permit. I can't carry concealed, but I can constitutionally carry open. So I hear where that's coming from, and that of course adds confusion.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah. Isn't it stupid how confusing we're all confused over this, and it's such a simple thing that it all needs to be fixed.
I can see where it comes from, just because over time things get changed and word sounds good, so it gets used for more than one thing, I guess.
All right.
Yeah.
So I've invited E Honda out there, who's been green most of the show. However, on Sunday he does a conspiracy chat, and I showed him how I challenged at the end of his show about how dusty and old his conspiracies were, so they can't really even be conspiracies anymore. He's boycotting the chat. He refuses to join the chat.
So is there a conspiracy surrounding his conspiracy chat? Is that what you're saying?
I feel like there's more than one conspiracy about this. I just need to pick those topics. All right, well, that was an interesting one as far as, people having a right. But what does they say? Dangerous freedom over whatever the other one is. Safe.
Yeah. Secure liberty or safe liberty, or I don't know, something along that lines.
Dangerous freedom over something safety. And that's the thing. So I think the other thing, though, is that I forget who I was chatting with the other day, and blah, blah, blah. If you're going to be scared of your neighbor, like, why aren't you afraid of arson? Like, why aren't you afraid of just the stuff that's horrible that people can do? And I have to bring it up, right? There's things that you can do with a piece of gasoline or a lighter and some gasoline or poison or horrible things. And if people were truly that evil and set on, worked on, we have literally just singular instances. We don't have superhero CIA and FBI who are running all over with capes and like supercomputers and AI and little robots and like missing or men in black aliens helping them to like save the planet every 45 minutes from all the horrible people that can easily destroy us. But there are definitely ways you can easily destroy people. There just aren't that many people bent on destroying the world. There's not that many people. There's just a couple of people that are either angry at their other like criminal friends or whatever, I don't guess they're not friends, but criminal adversaries in certain areas, and they're shooting at each other, or they're dominating or establishing territory, or how those dynamics are. So the rest of the country isn't basically, and those people I'm sure go home and live normal lives. It's just when they're at work, this political and the police and everything have created a thing that makes them have to be super violent in order to keep their territory in such a high whatever turnover situation where they're getting dragged to jail or killed. So they got to be super ruthless. Well, I bet you again, when they go home, they're just regular people, and they're probably everybody else in those neighborhoods, there's regular people that just have to deal with that junk on a regular basis. And anyhow, so that we don't live in a place where people are being thwarted and arsoning and poisoning and other horrible events. There's people that are out there that want to control and they want to set the perception and stuff. So yeah, if your perception is that people out there couldn't have concealed carry because if they took, if they participated in that freedom, that right, that it would be dangerous, then why should you allow them to have a car? Like, what else are you going to judge them on? Can they have prescription medicine? Can they have scissors? Can they live, more than one story with children? Like, can they be up in the air with children? Are they allowed to rent cars? Like, is that too dangerous? Like, can they be on buses with, should there be some sort of divider between the driver and the people? Like, how dangerous are these people? So, and I think, I don't know, is that a way to you don't think they're, seriously, if you just nod and say, yep, then you're kind of saying, yeah, I agree with you. But if you say, really, they don't drive, are you scared of them driving? Do you think they're just, because they're so reckless or careless, they're going to just turn their wheel and take out 6 or 8 people on the sidewalk, keep driving, and we just don't even hear about it because these people are so brazen in their murder or whatever? Like, so anyway, I challenge it because I think that's one of those things that, I don't know, like what you were mentioning earlier, sometimes it just takes like a moment to say, hey, wait a minute, are you sure about that? Is that really what you wanted to say? Because, there's consequences to that. Some people don't think the same way as that. And maybe they don't ever say it that way again. I don't know if that's worth it. And that's maybe back to the same thing. You're not going to get like Military Arms Channel or Hickok, somebody with a massive reach who's going to be able to stop somebody short and say, hey, really? You're going to suggest that they can't have a CCW, but it's okay for them to have a car. It's okay for them to have access to gasoline and whatever. But if you're that concerned, that's not going to hit home. But Gary's saying it to him, Wood's saying it to him, me saying it to him, right, in real life, like, as we're having that conversation at work. That's how we change things, right?
Right. Yep.
Ideally, that guy goes home and says, you can't believe what this guy said to me. Starts the whole conversation, and now his kids are like, wow, I didn't know Dad was such a crazy point of view on stuff. I'm glad somebody set him straight. I appreciate my dad better.
Right. Yeah. Or, a lot of times, those conversations, you don't change a mind with that conversation right then and there. So that guy goes home and, oh man, that guy was, blah, 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 this, that, and the other, and maybe he gets to thinking about it. You know what I mean? And there's something to be said about, people are really proud. And so, a lot of times, give them an out, give them the opportunity to walk away pissed off or walk away thinking they're right or whatever so that they save face. And then they get home and they, wherever, and they get to thinking about it later on, and maybe they change their opinion, but you know what? They didn't have to change it in front of you and lose face because of it or feel, ignorant or shamed or anything else because of it. You fostered that change and then, just let them deal with it. Some people just want to argue, they want to, start that and then argue to the death right then and there. And that's not the approach.
No, because if you can plant the seed, it's like you say, maybe 6 months down the road or something like that, something happens to one of their neighbors or they watch a news story or something like that. And they think, maybe they're right. Maybe I do need to protect myself.
Well, and then another thing too is if you have that conversation, you have that back and forth with somebody, and then 6 months later, you see them in the gun shop, and they're talking about this, they're talking about that, and you're like, wow, they've completely done a 180. Don't bring it up. Don't bring up the conversation you had before. Water under the bridge, and have a symbiotic, whatever you want to call it, conversation with them about their newfound,
Be like, ha, I knew I was right. See, this guy said he hated guns, and now he's in here shop buying guns. And this guy said he hated them, and I told him he liked guns. Now he's in here buying guns. Even though he said
it happens more often than you think.
Act like, act like they come to it on their own. Act like you weren't even involved in it. Whatever, and move on.
I've had
Secretly check that box off and move on.
I've had 3 or 4 teachers that I've had really good discussions, and then maybe 6 months, a year later, I'm the first one that they want to go to the gun store with.
Nothing wrong with that.
But I think there's a difference between the debate and the discussion too.
Oh,
Try
yeah.
to keep it at a discussion level, and if it starts
Well-
getting heated, bail out.
Well, and it's always nice to leave that door open if you can. And the reason is because you're actually right. You're absolutely right, Woods, because some people don't want to lose space, and you've got to allow for that as well. But if you want to leave that door open as much as you can for those people that do come to a realization and then they don't know where to go, right? And if you left that door open, then perhaps they can come back like the people you're talking about with you. Perhaps they can come back to you and say, "Hey, I'm thinking about X, Y, and Z. Where do I go from here? Yeah, I know you know all about this. Where do I go from here?"
I really like what Gary was saying. Sometimes you're just planting a seed. You may not see it germinate, but you might have said something if you didn't, get in a heated debate, and that made them go and that think, because I think the majority of people that I've met at least aren't anti-gun. They're just indifferent. And then you start thinking about it, and they're like, "Hey, he's got kind of a point. Maybe I do want to, think about defending my house, or, maybe we should keep tyranny at bay." Or
Well, and the thing is, the anti-gun element are unreasonable, unfactual, belligerent for the most part. They don't make any sense at all. So if you can have a conversation that's not a knockdown, drag out conversation, even if it does not end in that person agreeing with you right then, right there, then a lot of times, at some point, after that conversation, they're gonna see the way social media and a lot of the crap is nowadays. They're gonna see an anti-gun rant somewhere, and they're gonna compare you at that point and the conversation you had and the way you acted. They're gonna compare that to that anti-gunner.
yeah,
And if you're the bigger, better person and the more reasonable, factual, thoughtful person, then guess who they're going to side with, and that's going to start changing their mind.
It makes a lot of sense.
Well, and that's why I say we got to start encouraging them, valuing that, right? Or I shouldn't think we got it, but as a community, appreciate that, and that's a lot of potential reach, especially as you get into a year when people are going to start having 2020 type election discussions. I don't know how crazy it's going to get, or if they're going to try. I'm sure they're going to try to juice it up to be super charged up. But we can be familiar, or we can be having those conversations and be frustrated and come back and report on how frustrating conversations were, or we can be preparing for them and getting ready.
I don't. On that topic, I don't think our community effort, whatever you want to call it, I don't think is it's definitely not solidified in that way of thinking. I hear it in the chats around gun channels and all that, quite regularly. We need to be using the tactics of the left, and we need to be acting like them, and all this other stuff. And we don't. No, we don't, because that doesn't work. That does not set a contrast, and that's a contrast is how you make change. Is to show people there is a better way. There is a yin and a yang. There is a right and a wrong. There is a light and a dark. It's that contrast. And so if we meld and mix in by using leftist, anti-gunner, whatever you want to call it, tactics, then I think we defeat ourselves in a way with that. And get the mute off here. But then I wonder too, with the people that I hear say that, I wonder if those people are actually doing anything at all. You know what I'm saying? It makes me wonder if that's just not somebody that wants to gripe and complain, and it doesn't matter. You know, you say we need to do something one way, and they're just going to argue because they don't really want to do anything. So if you've got a good idea of how to move forward or change things, they're going to want to blow up and advocate for the antithesis of that simply because they don't want to do anything. Deep down, they really don't want anything to change.
Well, so none of that's wrong, but I don't agree 100% because as far as the using the tactics of the other side, for two reasons. It's if you can understand, you need to understand the other side, and if you understand their tactics, then you're going to be familiar enough to be able to use them. And if they're effective on their side, I mean, I guess I'm assuming the reason they're using their tactics is because they're effective for them, and they're using them on us because it's effective for those people. So if we understood their tactics, we might have a better idea of how to approach. In other words, if we want to say emotional versus statistical or logical or something, that's usually how it's described, right? So if we are aware, or can I even say masters of the emotional argument, then we'd be effective potentially. So I could see it being useful. And then I think just to understand the nuance, because I see this all the time, and that's one of the reasons I'm even still in the conversations, or else I wouldn't feel like there's any point to all this. If it was seriously just a big giant loop recording, which it kind of feels like sometimes, if you want to consider the election cycles the loop, or if you want to consider a 10-year cycle the loop, whatever the president, whatever you want to consider the loop, it can sometimes feel like that, but it's not, because things evolve or whatever. But shit, I was trying to use the fucking tape analogy and forgot where I was going with that one. But the idea that if we understand their tactic and we can master it, then we have that skill set, so we can hopefully be more effective. Oh, and then I was thinking of Matt, actually. Matt constantly sees just the surface, or just the black and white side of something argument that he's against or on the opposite side of, and then he attacks just the black and white side of it. So if you understand the emotional argument, and it's difficult, right? It's seriously difficult, because I've had conversations in the past, I don't mean like weeks ago, but years ago, when we had environments in our live chats that would allow people who were truly anti or truly non-gun, I wouldn't call them anti-gun as much as like non-violent. Those people would come into Matt's chat. He always has an open environment for that kind of stuff. But their thing was, like, they are not taking a life, and taking a life is nothing you have, including your own life or somebody else's life, if you ask them, is worth that. And that's a tough thing to understand, like, to put yourself in someone's mind like that. Like, but if you're not able to, then how are you ever going to be able to have a conversation that's effective? You don't need to change their mind to be like yours, but you need to let them understand where you're coming from. And if they're seriously in that position, they just think you're crazy to disvalue life because of your toaster. And that's the kind of message they'll come after. And it's easy to say, blah, 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 toaster, but it's more difficult to try to understand where the hell they come from with that concept. And then to then be able to, to have effective conversation. That's a long way of saying, I think it's worth knowing their skill so that you can use it, and so you can know where they're coming from, why they're using that knife or that sword instead of something else.
Yeah, that I absolutely agree with, and I don't completely disagree with, I don't completely. You definitely have to understand. Let's put this in the terms of battle. You have to understand the enemy to an extent. But then let's also use that analogy a little bit too. Their side has rifles. Our side had rifles. However, their side has tanks. Our side has tanks. Their side has fighter jets. Our side has fighter jets. However, they're not the same pieces of equipment, right? We're not using the same tools, basically. So some of the tactics can be the same, but the way in which we use them you know, or can be different. And I don't know, that may not make any sense. But one thing that I want us to do want to throw out there about the emotional, um, em- emotional arguments and being emotional is very effective, but it's very effective on a temporary basis. And the reason that it's only effective on a temporary basis is that emotions change so rapidly. Because let's put this in a situation where, you know, oh, well, I'm against, guns, blah, 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 blah. Then the next thing you know, family member is mugged, shot, dies, you know, um, let's say, let me back up, emotional, because family member dies from suicide, and then there's emotional around that, and oh, I don't want any guns, I don't want guns, I don't want this, and then the next thing you know, there's another event where a friend, family member, whatever, is mugged and then maybe murdered or subsequently or something like that, and the emotion changes. Why? Because it's a completely different situation. Now it's not, oh, that terrible gun, was what ended the life of my loved one. It was, oh, the bad guy used a terrible gun. You know, what if my loved one had that gun? So emotions can fluctuate, and so because of that, we have to root our arguments in. We have to, I agree, we have to understand, and we also have to validate, to an extent, emotions, because emotions are a real thing. People are really feeling. Most people, let me back up, some people are drama queens. Most people, if you really talk with them, there was some type of an incident in their life, and it's affected them emotionally, and so you have to validate and go, okay, I understand the emotions. I understand what you've been through. I
Well,
understand that, that you're that way. But
both
then
of the
you have to try to bring it around to logic and fact.
but both of these address the individual extreme examples, rare examples, without downplaying, but the rarity that there's even with all victims, even victims' families. So, we're not talking about a giant percentage of the population, although it's tried to been exaggerated to be. But we're talking about a relatively few who are either the victims or the direct relatives of the victims. And I mean, I guess that's part of the whole appeal to emotion. But if you look at the specifics of any situation, and let's take guns out of this, let's look at like cars, or let's look at food poisonings or something like, something that we have to deal with at a societal level, just so that we can all live together and share resources and stuff. Um, how often do we look at something where the the actual individuals involved, are the what am I trying to say? Like the facts for the situation. It's always on the side where they're trying to appeal because they don't have any facts on their side, right? So in other instances, if someone were to say, "Oh, pools aren't that big a deal," like nobody drowns in pools, the other side would say, "Oh no, come on, we got all this data that says the opposite." Um, with guns, though, they're not they're I don't know what the word is. They're like willing to accept the opposite. Like they're willing to accept data that's feeding a point of view rather than the facts.
Well, there's a reason for that. There's a blatantly obvious reason for that.
But
Um,
and so that's where if we address the, I guess what if we address the specific victims or the person who's been affected by the violence, then we're falling into the idea that we're bad people if we don't address it, and then we take the time away from the vast middle that aren't infected, vast numbers that aren't actually affected, where that aspect of guns, the violent or the dangerous part, are never an option. Like think of how many people own guns, never an accident, never violence, generations. Like somebody will own a gun, never a hunting accident, never a range accident. given to their kids, never an accident, given to their kids, never an accident. Literally in this country, that could have happened over and over and over. But then when we talk about the issues of an individual, it can be over exaggerated. Like, oh, look, here's a dangerous thing that happened and violence resulted. And I hear you, but I think it's also dangerous. Maybe that's what Jesus was saying, that if we fall into that ambush, then we take our microphone or speakers that we have to the world and we talk about one instance. And now because we're focused on violence, we've effectively focused an entire discussion on guns, on violence or horribleness, as opposed to innovation and tech and how they affect our society. And we say things like, son of a gun, half cock. Guns are so much a part of our society. When we go after their focus on the victims of tragedy, we connotate guns. Is that the word? Like we give them a bad connotation, like if they're only dangerous and sometimes they're not. All right, I'm rambling, but that was my.
Hey, is my mute on?
Oh, you're working now.
Okay. Something got screwy on my phone here. Well, yeah, you're right. I mean, we've got to try to curb this perception. It aggravates me to no end. You hear the politician, like in the Democratic debates or whatever, it was like, we live in a world where we got to remember what our child wore to school, blah, blah, blah. I'm thinking, he lives in a different world than me, because, that is such a rarity that I'm not worried about that, And so, yeah, I understand that, there are certainly certain areas and certain neighborhoods that, that is a very valid concern. And I think we need to be focusing, on whatever and however. For example, a lot of the work, like, let's say, Maj is doing with, trying to combat, those particular areas where, Chicago, for example, or whatever, that, day-to-day life is, rather dangerous from a percentage perspective. But, across the country, we're the safest society that ever has been, and continue, honestly, to get safer and safer, every day of the week. So I think there's got to be this, but we're inundated with, and we have been for years. It's not a new thing. It's not like 2013 happened or a couple of years ago happened, and it was like, oh, gun violence, gun violence, get rid of this, get rid of that. Oh, scary. It's such a violent, horrible country. Think of for how long now there's been warning labels on this and warning labels on that. Like, people are just so, there's peddlers of, I don't even know, emotional manipulation, I guess, is how you would put it. That,
but we
they want to push this narrative like everything is just so dangerous, and from a neighborhood to gun violence to knives to swimming pools to the sun rays to whatever it might be, GMO or whatever, that just all this stuff is just this horrible stuff. And reality is, it's not that bad.
All right, so here's interesting. If I were to tell you that something kills in the United States 3,200, almost 3,300 people a day, and most of those deaths are between 15 years old and 44 years old, additional 20 to 50 million are injured and disabled. I'm guessing that a year. What would you think that is?
Driving a car.
And that's automobile accidents. So 1.5 million people die in road casualties each year. That's 33,300 a day. But then I read down a little bit. I'm just on Google. I'm not doing anything fancy. What are the odds of dying in a car crash? So the odds of dying in a car crash are 1 in 103. Okay, most Americans are still most likely to die of natural causes, chiefly heart disease, 1 in 6 chance, or cancer, 1 in 7. So automobile, 3,000 people a day in this country, you still only got 1 in 100 chance So let me ask you, what is the
Think about that.
this is on Google here. What is your percentage chance of dying of an opiate overdose in this country?
An
If
opiate? Oh, it's going up. I'm
if
sure.
dying from a car is 1 in 3, or excuse me, 1 in 103. What's your chance of dying of an opiate? 1 in what?
1 in 150.
Goes Gizzard
1 in 200.
and Clover.
I think higher than that. I'm going to go probably 500.
1 in 500. So let me see if anybody out there is saying. No, that's what Clover's saying. I'm not saying that's the answer. So I'm seeing if anybody's answering that out there. According to Google, which is always right because it's on the internet, and it says right here, probability of dying from an opioid overdose is 1 in 96. Dying from a car, 1 in 3. So who's trying to distract who from what type of situation in this country? 1 in 96 chance of dying of opioids. Do you think that's a cross section of the entire country? Like little kids are accidentally dying? I mean, I guess it's possible little kids probably are dying accidentally, but or is that a whole bunch of people who are addicted to opioids, eating that whatever pill that's crazy kills them or whatever? So I don't know what they're doing, but odds of getting cancer way the hell more than anything we got going on. So this is, I don't know. I'm not saying it's all facts, right? That doesn't help nothing for the emotional, but
well, let's
some strategies if somebody's coming at you with this emotional, like, oh, I got to worry about what my kid's gonna wear. I guess when you were saying that, I was thinking whenever somebody says that to me, it's like, well, what about like all the other horrible things that could happen to a kid at school? Like every time your kid leaves, you should be aware of what your kid's wearing, right? Like
right.
in school buses, that's where I went. But it turns out school buses are actually the safest thing you could put a kid into.
What if they get?
Then kids die in a school bus all year. So,
well, I mean, let's not look at the whole, mass, murders at a school, but you should know what your kid's wearing, because what happened if for some reason they left school, or they left for school and they never show up at school. Let's say they're abducted on the street somewhere or whatever. It'd be really nice to know what your kid was wearing.
Or they just decide to go somewhere and they just wanted to go on a field trip of their own. Kid being a kid or whatever, friends went out playing the creek or whatever. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We've had students this year do that.
Well, getting back to the automobile accident.
In my day, we would have to ditch school and go play in the creek. Okay,
right. You said 101 and 103, right? What you said?
Yeah.
Okay. So that means that you've got a chance of dying every 103 times you drive a motor vehicle, basically. So if
that's not how that data works.
Not how that
That's not how that works. Okay.
Not at all.
I mean, that's like saying 100-year flood happens. It's just the statistical probability. Blah blah blah. It's just another way to because these things never happen. That's the thing. We're talking about things that hardly. I mean, they happen a lot, kind of. But in a country of 360 million people, they don't happen all that often. So it's just a way to compare things that don't happen all that often to each other.
All right.
But anyway, where were you going with that?
Well, I was just looking at the odds, and I was thinking that the odds are super high, but yet that's something that people do without giving it any thought whatsoever, emotionally, factually, or otherwise, every single day.
None. They'll walk down a sidewalk with just. Can you even imagine how many cars go past you? But what's interesting is there's about as many cars as there are guns. So think about it that way too. So in this country, at least. So there's all these cars going past you, and they can be anywhere from a learner's permit at 14 or something, right? 15, I don't know how old you got to be, all the way up to a super old person who shouldn't be driving anymore, to somebody distracted, drunk, mad, super happy, just so elated for some reason that they're listening to the radio and distracted because of it. Just a mechanical problem that an alert, conscientious, aware, skillful drivers just can't overcompensate for. And yet what happens? Like, how often do people go plowing off into streets and knocking people off cliffs, or going over some bridge and just going wacko and knocking a bunch of people off a bridge? Stuff just doesn't happen. We don't live in a violent world. It's like you say, people can't put the two together, that they can't see their juxtaposition of fear. 1.2 million
Yep.
accidents involving deer in the pants.
Oh yeah.
That's one of those things that's tough to mix in though, because there's people that probably don't even know what it's like to see a deer across the street. You know, they don't drive around in cars enough.
Right. Or man, here in Texas anyway, pigs. Whew. You know, more so than deer.
Well, I tell you what, we've been chatting about a bunch of different topics, and not gone super long. I'm going to flip over to screen share here and just zip down the front page. Back on Mondays, we typically used to take a look at the upcoming events. So I'm going to address that real quick. We have Shoot Talk coming up. The Dead Horse posted. Looks like it's coming up this Saturday up in Utah. A pretty cool annual event. Kind of a shoot and see, put your hands on stuff and go shoot it right away, if I remember. So it's like a gun show at a range. Got TriggerCon coming up, a couple of day event up in Seattle area. Woods. You been to it before?
No, I have not.
So, it started a few years back, and there was an effort to do something similar to a media day at the range, except up in Washington, not at SHOT Show. It started out, I guess, as sort of a store's parking lot sale type of thing, where the store might bring in like manufacturers and reps to bring in product and let people get hands on it. And then it grew, and then it eventually, I think, went into some sort of a convention center type of thing. And the problem was that they invited a bunch of people in the industry, and then said you couldn't carry in there, no concealed carry. They had guards and metal detectors and stuff. So interesting event, but we'll see how it unfolds this year. Not too many people attending it. A couple of people from Gun Channel started hitting it right at the beginning. Marco and Pink even flew across country to show up. I think Yankee might have even gone or attempted to go. Anyhow, it's an interesting event up in the Washington area. You got the ANME, which is sort of like a small, well, it is smaller than SHOT Show, but it's like a SHOT Show for surplus stores. That one's pretty cool. I guess they have it twice a year. The NRA Carry Guard's coming up in September. We got a while for that one, but it'll be interesting to see. I don't know if anybody's heard anything about Carry Guard yet. Last year, everybody was acting like it was a big deal. This year, I suspect it's going to get a little downplayed, if it even happens. You think it'll be in jeopardy? Seems like
I'm gonna venture, since it's around Carry Guard, probably not.
You think that it's still going to happen, like it's already paid for?
Yeah, probably it's being handled through different, funding and all of that. Yeah, it's probably good to go.
We'll see. They canceled it because of a storm one time. We'll see if they cancel it because of a shitstorm. So we got Bullpup Shoot coming up in Illinois, put on by, I think, Manticore Arms, and We Like Shooting shows up at it. That's where I found out about it. I attended that one a couple of years ago. It's been going on for, I think I attended the second or third year, so it's been going on for a while, still going. I don't know if Armament Next is still out there, but him and Tyvon do some sort of a creator event. I don't know if this is their first time doing it or the second. They did one earlier in the year, and this one is a multi-day event, similar to what KD was doing, except on a smaller scale, I think. Look forward to seeing if anybody shows up in that one. It's in Ohio. E Honda, who again has a link to this chat, and decided not to join, even though he's green out here for most of the show. Decided not to join because I showed him how his conspiracy theories are old and tired. He posted this thing about Dragon Man's machine gun shoot coming up on September 14th. Sounds like a blast. You're welcome. Then we got the Ultimedia, whatever it's called, AmCon. It's coming up the day before Gun Rights Policy. Gun Rights Policy coming up on September 20th. I'd suggest you be there. Yeah. Then we got the Knob Creek machine gun shoot. After that will be the Better Arizona Big Sandy shoot. I think Yankee went the 1 year, but he said it was a lot of ARs and other stuff he wasn't interested in that much. Yeah, that makes sense. Something like you say. And he wouldn't be interested in those. All right, so we got a bunch of people joining us on the Gun Channel side. Thanks for everybody who's been participating over there. See all the little green dots and all the conversations we've been having. Gun Channels is a community. It's 6 years old. It's built to communicate for projects like this one, for conversations like this. We've got people joining us on the YouTube side, 13 thumbs over, or 13 people watching. We got 12 thumbs. Appreciate the high thumb ratio. I want to say thanks to Woods, Pizzard, and Clover for jumping in and being a part of the chat today. Mondays we dig into how to make content, how to create content, and today we talked about the idea of smaller groups creating innovation. I guess I didn't talk about my crowdfunding thing, so we'll talk a bit about that after we let these guys plug. So Woods, you don't plug nothing really, but you jump into lots of chats. You want to plug any of the chats you participate in?
Just a big fan of Clover, so be sure and watch that.
I heard that guy. Gizzard, what do you got coming up? What's your next big project?
Next big project, I've got some videos coming out on the. I'm working on the Taurus G2S review of that, and also a little bit on the Glock 19. Although I think just about everybody knows what the Glock 19 is, so no big special there. But of course, we got Foul Territory Friday night, 9 Eastern, 8 Central, and early bird chat Sunday morning, 10 a.m. Eastern, 9 Central.
Thanks for hosting those each week and then posting them on gun channels.
You bet.
A lot of people look forward to that. Clover, what do you got happening? You had a chat earlier today, and then not until Wednesday. He's unmuted. He just didn't say anything.
Am I muted?
No, you're not muted.
Oh. It'll be Hannah and Andrew Davies, which do muzzleloader shotgun, which is kind of interesting. And then they're also getting into some steel challenge. So, and Miss Bella, who was on the show last week, she's helping me co-host this week too. So it should be interesting.
You're saying that they competitively shoot black powder shotgun?
Yes.
At what?
At Sporting Clays.
You just can't miss, I guess.
Pretty much.
Interesting.
Pretty much. If you're gonna shoot, if they're gonna shoot doubles, you use a double barrel, obviously, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just shooting single birds.
And then some sort of like pellet, or are they taking forever to reload all the time?
Well, it reloads like a. They actually, giving a lot away, without watching the show, but
I won't watch that
yeah,
show.
they do what? Yeah, they yeah. I mean, it's legitimately muzzle load. So I mean, I didn't. The powder that they said they used is going to be regular powder. So I mean, you're talking about powder patch, shot, ram it all down. Each time. They said it takes. What did they say? It takes about 30 minutes to shoot 15 clays, I think, or something like that. So they're definitely loading it every time.
Right on. Well, that would make you appreciate each shot, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we just dropped a link. Thanks, Gary, for dropping links out there. I just dropped one to Vandalista's chat, or not chat, but channel over on the channel, over on the YouTube. It's getting late. That's everybody's plugs. Now I'm going to talk about this project that I started yesterday. So got another project going for the 2A history project that started a while ago, and last year I put up an unsuccessful, I guess, crowdfunding project to just basically create time to work on it. And this year we've got a couple of weeks, 30 days, 60, not even 40 something days till the Gun Rights Policy Conference. Maybe a little more than that. 60 days coming up to the Gun Rights Policy Conference. And ideally, I'd like to do whatever I can to get as many people who are going to be there aware of each other and communicating with each other so we can make the best use of the AmCon and the conference itself. And ideally get kind of something kick-started here, sparked, to give them all the idea that they don't need to do this just once a year, that they can do the stuff on a more regular, hopefully monthly basis. And then just to experiment with a $2 project. So it's $2 for 2A. Ideally, if we can get a bunch of people to share this, we get thousands of people to participate for $2. It brings in big pile of money. It gives me some time to do my thing up until the Gun Rights Policy Conference, and use the project itself, a running project, to inspire some of the people who will be at that project to see what a low opt-in type of project can do. So I have no idea. It's an experiment. And if you would, please help share it. Feel free to participate financially if you like, but it's more of an exercise. It's more of a catalyst, again, to give us, well, me, some funding so that I can spend the time on it, but then give us something to look at for some of the people who are doing really good work who just haven't explored the crowdfunding platforms. And once we get to working with more of the traditional or old-fashioned, whatever type of media, bringing those people into the fold, hopefully we can see some of the benefits of having a bunch of people throw a couple of bucks at some of these projects and give them the ability to fund or to grow without worrying about the funding side of it. So it's an effort towards that. If you would, spread it out there. We'll probably chat more about it in the upcoming days. It's just 18 days, so I plan on doing some of the 2A workshops focused on it and inviting, again, people in who either going to be at the Gun Rights Policy Conference or who should be at the Gun Rights Policy Conference, right? Give them a little bit of the wet their whistle, give them something to look forward to. I guess since I've got it on here, I might as well take a second and play this video. You know what the name of this song is, Clover?
Look at a new project.
It's called Clover. It's one of the YouTube free songs. It's called Clover.
It's over on
It might be called Clover 3.
Indiegogo, the 2A History Project 2019, with the Gun Rights Policy Conference coming up in September and the election cycle of 2020 on the horizon. Our goal is to establish some time so that we can work on some of the 2A History Project and finish it up before the Gun Rights Policy Conference in September. Part of that will be interviewing 2A activists and those involved in our Second Amendment gun owners' rights community, taking those interviews, the people that we interview, turning them into cartoons for the overall 2A History Project, for some graphics and some infographics to help illustrate our 2A history, but also to have 2A workshops, to have some time to do these projects in the open, live with 2A workshops, and we'll continue to invite the people who will be at the AMCON, the 2A Media Conference, the day before the Gun Rights Policy Conference, and those that attend the Gun Rights Policy Conference, as well as any 2A media that has questions about any of the crowdfunding projects on either Indiegogo, Kickstarter, or even Patreon. We want to get people mobilized so that they're ready for AMCON, they're ready for the Gun Rights Policy Conference, and we're all working as much as possible in harmony as the election cycle of 2020 comes up, so that we don't offer just an observation of what's going on, but we can attempt to influence and motivate people who are active. And have some efficiency with the Gun Rights Policy Conference and SHOT Show coming up early in the year. We have a lot of potential. We'd like to get some time to help hone that. If you'd like to help us, please get on board. Please help share the project. Let us know in the comments what you think. As always, thanks for watching. The guys and gals of GunWebsites.com encourage you to take a CCW class every year, practice at least once a month, and carry every day. Thanks for watching GunWebsites.com.